I'd like to welcome you all to the CPP Education Team's Ask an Expert webinar, combining Strong and MBTI results in career counseling. We have more than 708 people registered today, which is really exciting. My name is Karen Gonzalez, and I'm the Associate Marketing Manager here at CPP. I'll be moderating today's webinar, and we'll be introducing our featured speaker, Judy Gruder, in just a moment. But before I do, I'd like to do a quick walkthrough of the webinar format for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. Today's webinar will run for approximately 90 minutes. During the presentation, if you have questions, you're welcome to submit them to me using the questions function in the webinar controls or send me a chat message. Judy will be pausing throughout the webinar today to answer your questions, and I'll give everyone a chance to pose their questions during these breaks. Two representatives from the CPP Education Team are also in attendance, Jim Larkin and Jack Powers, and they'll be available to answer questions as well at the end of the webinar. Judy will be introducing them a little later on. As with all our webinars, today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording in approximately a week. Please note that the PowerPoint slides are not available for the Ask an Expert series. Now that I've walked you through the logistics, I'd like to introduce our expert. I'm very excited to welcome as CPT's Ask an Expert, Judy Gruder, GS Principal and Trainer. Judy has been a career development program consultant and trainer for more than 35 years, as well as a National Certified Counselor and NCDA Master Career Counselor. She's a recognized authority on the uses of assessments in career counseling and is co-author of a number of publications and reports on the Strong Interest Inventory, such as the new iCert Strong report and Myers-Briggs tools. Judy is also the author of the GS MBTI Certification Program for Career Counselors and Educators and co-author of the GS Strong Interest Inventory Certification Program. Please join me in welcoming Judy, and now I'd like to turn over the webinar to her. Welcome, Judy.
Hi, Karen. Thank you. And greetings to everyone. We're going to be looking today at two different ways of combining Strong and MBTI results and when and how we might use the two different strategies. We'll look at the combined report, and we'll look at how to combine the assessments without a report. I'm going to give just a brief historical perspective first. I do this not because you need a history lesson, but to emphasize the point that these assessments are the standards in career assessment. They've been around for nearly a century and generated the kind of reliability and validity data that we can trust. Almost all of the assessments that are popping up on the market today try to validate against these two instruments. That's why they're so important. Many of you already know that I have an NT bias toward research and data, and that's why I focused my 40 years of working with assessments specifically on the Strong and MBTI. This is Carl Jung. The MBTI reflects the theory of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, and it was developed by Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers. It's been revised and refined over 80 years of research. Here's E.K. Strong. Looks a little different from Carl Jung, huh? The Strong started in the 1920s with the empirical research of Dr. Strong, testing and defining the personalities of workers in various occupations. Later on, actually it wasn't until the 1970s, John Holland's RISC framework was added to the Strong, and the instrument has been revised also and refined over more than 80 years. In fact, there's a new revision coming out in April that I'll mention again a little bit later. In the traditional career exploration framework that most of us use, together these assessments provide the best information available about both the student and potential academic and career choices. This process can be complicated, but using the Strong and MBTI assessments makes the process as efficient as possible while still providing in-depth information for those career practitioners who work in settings where sessions can be extended. The heart of type, what we're showing here, is the fallback for self-exploration. We compare it with the Strong themes to see if interests have developed in a direction that is natural for the type. The heart of type addresses the questions, who am I and why do I want to work in the career counseling model. The Strong basic interest scales and the composite occupational scales code address the academic and career possibilities for the person. They answer the questions, what do I want to do and where do I want to do it? The Strong Personal Style Scales and the MBTI EI and JP orientations are about behaviors. They answer the how questions. How do I want to work? How do I want to learn? Using the two assessments together provides us with a diagnostic framework to cut to the chase and identify what's really going on with our students and our clients. Are they looking for a good fit between this heart and the hexagon? Is there a mismatch between who they are, represented by the heart of type, and what they've prepared themselves to do? That would be the hexagon. Are they ready in terms of identity development to explore options and make decisions? If career assessment, in fact, if psychology were a perfect science, we'd administer tests that would tell students, here, this is what to major in. This is what career field you should enter. This is who you are. Even though there are a lot of websites that suggest take this test to find your perfect career, it'll only take 15 minutes and $100 or so. It just doesn't work that way, even when the results are clear. My experience has been that many times when respondents are clear, the assessment results say something different. Or when assessments are clear, the respondent says something different. Or one assessment says one thing, the other says something else. In any case, the answer isn't going to be on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. As the career exploration framework that we looked at suggests, what we're looking for are starting points for discussion and the career exploration process. Comparing the two assessments, the MBTI and the Strong each address self-knowledge and career possibilities, but they do it very differently. They complement and enrich each other. You can allude to the whole picture with just one or the other, but some of the actual pieces will be missing. The MBTI looks internally. It picks up on natural preferences, preferences that are as natural to us as handedness or eye dominance. We can predict what clients would enjoy doing from their natural inclinations if only they knew about it. Its interpretation is based on a theoretical model, the theoretical model of Carl Jung, and indexes of clarity, PCIs, indicate how certain respondents are of their preferences and how sure we as practitioners can be that the assessment got the type right. The occupational suggestions that that are on the MBTI come from self-selection ratios, SSRs. They're literally indexes of attraction. If a certain type is attracted to a career field or occupation much more frequently than we would expect from how often that type appears in the general population, we can infer that there's something about that career field or occupation or college major or anything else that is naturally attracted to the type. The Strong is quite different. It looks externally. It reflects what we know about what we enjoy doing. It's what we become rather than what we were meant to be. Holland's theoretical framework is the glue that ties the parts of the inventory together, but the scales are normative and empirical and generate standard scores that compare respondents with people in general and workers in representative occupations. Using the Strong and MBTI together is like putting the pieces of a puzzle together. Sometimes they fit, sometimes they don't. Sometimes one assessment addresses the presenting concerns, sometimes the other. Sometimes we need both. I'm going to talk for just a little bit about which assessment to use and when, and I want to stress that this comes more from my experience and my training of hundreds and hundreds of career counselors, but it's certainly not the definitive answer to this. Which assessment to use and in what order really depends on the career development issue, why the respondent is taking the assessments. I tend to administer the MBTI almost always. I guess I just can't help it. No matter why the client is taking assessments, type is helpful. It suggests how I should present information, and that's pretty important. It's the framework for evaluating every concern that is shared from the point of assessment forward. It gives me something to go on when interests are not developed, and even when the Strong is flat. The middle two letters tell me what is really most valued by the client, even if they're telling me that the only thing that's important is money. It's a really good place to start with very young students who are just forming their identity. And it's the instrument of choice when working with adults who have work adjustment issues. Work adjustment issues like getting along with their colleagues, supervising direct reports, working with customers, etc. So there aren't very many situations where I don't have a strong, now if they have an MBTI. Now if they've already taken the MBTI in the past and they know their type, we don't retest. Because remember, type is that it's a genetic imprint. If they've already got it, we don't have to test it to confirm it. Now the strong is most helpful with high school students who are planning for college, college students who are exploring majors, anyone at any stage of life who is exploring potential career fields. It's more concrete than the MBTI. It works best when respondents are already somewhat self-aware. I use it frequently with adults who are in transition and with employees who are exploring opportunities with their current employer. We're also finding it useful for employers who are assigning staff to customer markets. People who are selling products, for instance, and should they be selling to doctors or contractors in the construction field or social workers, or it's their basic interest. The salesperson's basic interest can often connect with their clients, specifically when their interests show up on the strong. We'll look at type first, and then we'll look at the MBTI a little bit, and then we'll pull pieces together. Psychological type is the natural preferred way of using one's mind, the middle two letters, and directing one's energy, EI and JP. Type is a lot like eye color. If you think about it, we're born with one color that's predetermined. It's a genetic imprint. We can change our eye color by putting on contact lenses of different colors for different occasions, but we're always more comfortable when we take out the artificial lens and go back to what is natural. If only there were a magical saline solution to cleanse our identity of impurities and make it clear about who we really are at our heart. Then we could just take the MBTI and we'd have the type and we wouldn't have to explore everything that's underneath it, but it's not like that. MBTI type codes are made up of one letter from each of these pairs. Most of you are familiar with them. The letters represent our natural preference, that's our eye color, for extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, the criteria we use for making decisions, and judging versus perceiving, the way we approach our daily lives. The preference pairs form these 16 types. Each type is a dynamic interaction of the letters. Although each letter has its own inherent meaning, the complexity of the instrument comes from how each letter is enhanced by the other three. The manual and most MBTI publications include brief descriptions of each type like this. These charts, these tables represent the core characteristics of each four-letter combination. I like to think of type as kind of like a 16-room house. We all have our favorite room, but we go to all the other rooms when we need to. Type is what grounds us. If we know what it is and claim our own strengths and potential pitfalls, it gives us access to all of the other 15 type behavior patterns when we need them, when it's appropriate to use them. If we're unclear about our natural preferences, we spend our life searching, putting on different colored contact lenses, but not in conscious control of which color lens to wear for what. Respondents can't really find a career or even life satisfaction if they don't know what they're trying to satisfy. Now, many of you who have been through certification training are familiar with this model about the heart of type, that the two middle letters of type are the mental functions. They're the cognitive processes. And together, these two middle letters, these two functions, are the heart of our type, who we are. SN is the perceiving part of our personality. It's how we process information and how we process our experiences. TF is the judging part of our personality, how we evaluate information and experiences and how we make decisions. And that's why in type language we can't really refer to people as P's or J's, because we all have one P part, one perceiving preference, and one judging preference. It's the heart of type that defines who we are, and it suggests career fields that will attract us. The hearts of type comprise the 4 columns of the type table, and the columns suggest what we'd like to learn about and what career fields would be the most satisfying. We just have to know about them in order for them to show up on the strong. Here's the essence of each column, each heart of type, what drives each one toward career and life satisfaction. Doesn't matter what work environments they're in, the ST types need to get it right. The SF types need to provide service. The NF need to empower. The NT need to understand. When respondents can claim their heart of type preferences, they're more likely to be able to access their less preferred. This is pretty important in today's economy, where the fit between person and career isn't always a good fit. For instance, there's a difference in motivation between an NF type who is working in an ST job because it's the only job they can get, and an NF type who is doing ST work because it's supporting an NF vision. It's the difference between an INFP type who works as a bank teller and an ENFP type who's collecting and recording data as part of a fundraising initiative for an artist cooperative. When the less preferred functions are related to the heart, they make sense. They're not draining for us. It's from the heart of type that we can generalize to college majors, career preparation, and to typical career fields. If the strong is flat, we can usually begin to dig something career-related out of the MBTI. We can get the overall picture from the MBTI and then begin to tack in some specifics from the strong. Even if the strong theme is inconclusive, there's still a lot of specific information we can get from it that we can relate back to the heart of type and the career fields. We also know that the heart of type can be used to help students to understand how they learn best, what kind of campus culture will be the most motivating for them. And I included this time because there are more and more independent college counselors that are using the MBTI, and I think being able to connect type with academic learning environments, with campus cultures, is an awful lot of what they do. For instance, in an ST learning environment, examples are provided of how to do things, and learning flows logically and builds sequentially, and ST students need to know if they're doing it right. SF teaching and SF learning environments personalize experiences, and teachers provide personal feedback. The learning builds sequentially. Students' efforts are appreciated personally. In an NF learning environment, creativity and self-expression are encouraged. The environment is personally meaningful. Choices are given of how to do assignments. Learning is connected to a bigger personal picture. NT teaching is intellectually challenging. It encourages inventiveness. It builds ideas through debate. It flows logically but not sequentially. I'm hoping that you can see that when you're surrounded by teachers who are teaching in these styles, there's an environment that's created. And if an SF teacher, for instance, ends up in an NT learning environment, it's a different language. It's like an English-speaking student taking a course in Greek. I'm going to look at the MBTI Career Report just for a minute here. This is the MBTI Career Report from an ENFJ. This is on the Form M, the form that we're currently using with the MBTI. And the Career Report adds this information about work tasks and work environment preferences. And work tasks and work environment preferences add the EI and JP behaviors to the heart of type. When I'm using this report, I spend more time on this page than I do on the occupational listings. I'll very often have the strong booklet, the Where Do I Go Next booklet open at the same time, and compare this page from the MBTI report with the How Do I Want to Spend My Time and What Kind of Work Environments Are Most Productive sections from the strong booklet. They usually overlap quite a bit, as you're going to see in a minute. The career report for the MBTI also suggests tips on how type affects the career exploration process, challenges, strategies, etc. And it discusses type-related strengths and challenges along with strategies for the exploration and job search process. I'm going to show you some occupations and some job families from the MBTI next that we're going to overlap with the strong. And before we start that overlapping process, I'll pause for some questions if any of you are thinking of some that you want to submit now. Now, in the MBTI Career Report, the MBTI lists ONET job families that are ranked in order of attraction for each type. This is ENFJ. And what this listing is saying that ENFJs are attracted to community and social services and arts, design, entertainment, etc. more frequently than you would expect from their representation in the population in general. And these are the 24 most popular occupations out of a list of almost 300. If you haven't seen the MBTI report, you can download a sample from the CPP website at cpp.com. There's a sample reports link right on the home page. Again, these are based on self-selection ratios. So the listing is in the order of attractiveness of the occupation to the type. When I'm using these lists, which sometimes are kind of off-putting to students and clients, I try to have them look for patterns, what the different occupations have in common with each other, rather than focusing on anything specific. I'm going to pause for just a second to hear from Karen if any questions have come in, and so maybe I can take a sip of water at the same time. Yeah. Karen?
Okay. So we have a few that are actually coming in right now, but we have the first one from Lisa. She's saying, hello, please address how to appropriately interpret opposite careers from the MBTI Career Report versus the Strong Interpretive Report. Thank you.
Lisa, we're going to do that. That's the next part of the program. We're going to cover it in a couple of different ways.
Great. Okay, we have another one from Christy. She's asking, do you run this report based on their best fit type?
Yes, yes. One of the interesting things about this report is if you run it and get a reported type and then verify a different type, you can go into Skills 1, enter the verified type, and run what I call a corrected report for the best fit type. Then you have the reported type and the best fit type sitting right in front of you, and you can compare them back and forth as part of the type verification process. Very, very helpful in interpreting, I think.
Thank you. Another one that came in from Stacy. She says, I believe this report is geared towards students. Is it also applicable for job changers?
Now, this is the MBTI Career Report. It's actually directed at all life stages. It's not written in student language or anything. When I'm working with older adults, I tend to use the career fields a little bit more from the Strong than I do with the MBTI, but you could certainly look for these patterns. You're going to hear me say over and over and over again, if you've been to 20 webinars, you've heard me say it at least 40 times, it's not about job titles. It really isn't. It's about work environments and patterns that come out from job titles. So what's the underlying pattern of what we're looking at here? We're seeing helping, we're seeing creativity. And we're seeing, you're seeing NF all over the place, and that's what we want to focus with on these lists. When I'm dealing with a 45-year-old who's changing jobs, I'm not necessarily concerned with one specific job off of this list or off the Strong. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we overlap them in just a minute.
Okay, we have several coming in. We have another one from Sarah. So she's saying, when I give the MBTI and Strong and receive separate reports, I frequently see more crossover with the Strong code and the moderately attractive careers in the MBTI report versus the most attractive. Would there be any reason for this?
I think you'll see that when we start talking about them together, because I'm about to fit the Strong in. The Strong depends on what they've been exposed to. It's not it's not who they're naturally predisposed to become. It's what they know about. And you're going to get overlap, and you're going to get differences. And the biggest bingo, the biggest the most important overlap is when you get basic interest scales on the strong that overlap with the highest career fields on the MBTI. But it doesn't happen all the time. It just doesn't. And we have to put the pieces together a little more creatively, and I'll show you how we do that. And Karen?
Yes?
We should probably hold the questions that bring the strong into the picture. I wanted to pause here to see if we needed to clarify anything on the MBTI before we brought the strong in.
Okay, yeah, actually I have a question from Mary that's asking, can you explain what you mean by you know the verified type, parentheses?
You know the verified type. When I think, say it again, Karen. Read it again.
So she wrote, can you explain what you mean by, quote, you know the verified type, unquote?
Oh, okay. When someone takes an MBTI, what you get on a piece of paper is called the reported type. It's how they answer the questions at the time that they take it. When an MBTI is administered, one of the requirements is that the reported type be verified by an MBTI practitioner. So there needs to be a group interpretation or an individual interpretation where the preference pairs on the MBTI are thoroughly discussed with respondents, and they verify what has come out on their actual report. Once they do that, it's called the verified type, or the best fit type, or the true type, or the natural type. Good question.
Great. Do you have time for another?
Yeah, let's do one more, and then we better pull in the strong.
Okay. Let's see, John's asking, I use Type Talk with 8th grade students to describe the dichotomies. Do you think they're old enough to understand?
I'm not familiar with the exact language from Type Talk, so I can't say. They're certainly old enough to understand the concepts of the 4 preference pairs. I've presented them to 4th graders. It just depends on the language you use. You just want to be careful not to be too anecdotal, because it's easy to twist the meaning of these words, of these preference pairs. So as long as you're basing the way you're describing it on key words and phrases that have been specifically identified through research with the preference pairs, you're okay. I just haven't looked at Type Talk for a while. I think that's one of Otto Kroger's works, and I'm sure he says it right. It's a more casual way of presenting it. I like this. I like that stuff. Should we go into the strong for a few minutes?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Judy.
Okay. I have to get my arrow back in the right place here. Here is the hexagon of the 6 personality codes on the strong. Now, we've been talking about the MBTI, which primarily looks at who we are and why life or career are important, who we were meant to be, and why life and career are motivating for us. The strong takes it another direction. It looks at the what and where questions. What specifically have we come to know about up to this point in our lives, and what work environments might be satisfying? There's 6 categories on the strong. The assumption is that what we know about, our interests, will lead us to satisfying work environments. And I'm going to make a point probably 3 times between now and the end that the strong is about connecting people with satisfying, productive work environments. It's not about matching people with job titles. No matter what work environment we eventually wind up in, we're likely to approach it in type. So for instance, if we are INTP engineers, which happens a lot, we'll approach engineering very intellectually, very analytically. If we're INTP counselors, guess what? We'll approach counseling very intellectually and analytically. To change it around, if we're ESFJ social workers, we'll approach our work in ways that promote harmony and provide practical assistance to anyone who needs it. And if we're ESFJ engineers, we'll approach engineering in ways that promote harmony and provide practical assistance to anyone who needs it. And what we're trying to do with the strong and the MBTI is find an environment that honors the type that we bring to it. In a perfect world, who we are and what career field we are, what career field we're in or aspiring to are going to be the same thing. In other words, what we become is authentic to who we are, but that's in a perfect world. Here are some of the perfect fits, some of the most natural fits. Although we're finding that the focus of career counseling in this decade is less about finding the perfect fit than it is about being able to fit your authentic personality, your type, into any work environment that might be available to you and be appreciated for it. So it's the INTP who does go into social work, what work environment is going to appreciate the INTP. And the ESFJ who goes into engineering, what engineering environment is going to appreciate ESFJ. Now these are the most typical fits between the dynamics of each type and corresponding work environments, but they're certainly not the only types that are attracted to these work environments. Some of you, especially I know the participants that are listening today who are in our online certification program, are really getting a handle on type dynamics. And for instance, if you look at INFP, I've got that next to the artistic work environment. INFPs are very attracted to artistic work environments. And what's going on from type dynamics is their introverted dominant feeling is being expressed through extroverted intuition in the form of art. And if you look at ESTJ, I've got that over next to enterprising. This is extroverted dominant T decision-making that's using introverted sensing information. That's how type dynamics work when we're making these matches up. If that's new to you, that's kind of the next level of type after learning to appreciate the 4 letters by themselves. Back to the hexagon again, the RIASEC theme structure behind the strong is based on Hollands Theory of personality types and work environments. And what is key to this theory is that work environments are formed by the people in them, not by the tasks that are done. In fact, I was in a discussion this morning in our strong LinkedIn group about this. Someone was asking why flight attendant was coded artistic. And what's really interesting is that we code occupations on the strong according to how people in the occupations actually come out when they take the strong. So when flight attendants take the strong, they score artistic more often than not. And when flight attendants get together, it's a very artistic, independent, free-flowing, interesting, challenging discussion that goes on. I get involved with them a lot in the back of airplanes. I travel a lot. And just as a for instance here, artistic creators are expressive, imaginative, and idealistic. Even when they're working at conventional, practical, and efficient tasks, they create an artistic, creative environment. Again, we're not matching personality and job. We're matching personality and work environment. And that's why the coding on the strong of occupations is sometimes different than it is in ONET, for instance. Here's a scenario to think about. Liberal arts students, this is the liberal arts scenario that I run into so often, and I think a lot of you have too. Liberal arts students who major in the ologies and theosophies, for instance, tend to be more NF and NT than SF and ST. And when they take the strong, they test out as some combination of investigative and artistic with social as a backup. Shortly before graduation, they decide not to go to graduate school, and they come to the career office looking for career possibilities. Many have had internships and done community service, and that gives them something to start with, but many haven't. These are the ones who default to employability on the opposite side of the hexagon, and they wind up working out of the other side of their type. And it's painful for them. 10 years later, they're trapped in the ECR lifestyle. And I know, Karen, I know that one of the questions is going to be, what do we do about this? And the answer is we can't fix it during the last semester of the senior year, but we can address it throughout the 4-year college experience. I want to clarify something about what we call scores, although on MBTI reports they're actually indexes and don't measure. These are computer-scored MBTI results for the ENFJ that we were looking at in the career report. Notice that the MBTI is it's producing some numbers here. These are the indexes of clarity. They reflect how clear a person is about their preferences. They have nothing to do with how much of a trait a person has. This person has a very clear preference for feeling over thinking. It happens to be her dominant function. A clear preference for intuition, moderate preferences for extroversion and judging. Her feeling preference clarity index of 30 does not in any way suggest that she is more feeling than a person who verifies feeling over thinking and has a PCI of 5. This is not normative. We're not comparing respondents with anybody else. It literally is how much trust we can put in the reported results. Very different from the strong profile. The general occupational themes on the strong actually compare respondents to a norm group, to men and women in general, and they have scores. They're standard scores. So they get scores like 70 and 69 and 40. The ENFJ that we were looking at on the previous profile actually had standard scores of 70 and 69 on artistic and social. And these scores are much higher than most women, and they're actually called very high compared to most women. We've been looking at MBTI and strong results for an ENFJ who happens to have the ASE configuration on the strong. And the strong scores consistently reflected artistic, social, and enterprising themes throughout all of the sections. And you can see here that the genetic predisposition, the type, is on the left. And on the right, it looks like she's developed interests that are in line with the MBTI imprint. She's becoming what she was meant to be. And she's developing specific interests, these are from the MBTI, that are in line with her ENFJ type. The strong basic interests are scored like this, just like the general occupational themes on the previous slide, where you have standard scores comparing the respondents to men and women, and then you have VH stands for very high, H stands for high, M stands for moderate. Those interpretive words compare interests to just the gender. The strong also measures how similar interests are to typical workers in various occupations. And we're going to compare this with the occupations on the MBTI in a minute. The higher the score on an occupation, the more similarly the respondent answered the strong to people in the occupation. What we have to remember from the strong is that these scores are not based on how often or what degree you say like or dislike. It's how often you answer a question on the strong the way school counselors answered the strong or teachers answered the strong. The beauty of the strong, I think, after years of working with it, is in weaving all of these different kinds of scales together. It's much different than just a code like what we get on the MBTI. Now let's compare some things. Here are the ENFJ ASE that we just looked at. Here are the top 5 basic interest areas from the strong and the ranking of job families on for ENFJs, the most attractive job families, the highest. And the job families are ranked on the career report from most attractive to moderately attractive to least attractive. And you're going to expect some overlap between basic interests and job families. And this is, again, taking a look at, have the interests developed, the 5 basic interest areas, in a direction that the MBTI would suggest. Now, when they don't overlap, and the question came in before, where the strong basic interest areas or perhaps the general occupational theme was relating more to the moderate job families for the type, and that usually suggests that interests have developed that are not directly in line with the type, possibly picking up on parts of the type, but not the whole type configuration together. And that's not a bad thing, because we can put those pieces together too. In fact, you're going to see one that really does it in an interesting way. Now, with the 2 assessments, we can also compare occupational titles. I'm looking for any overlap between the strong and the ENFJ career report. Overlaps are big bingos, because it means that the person is answering the strong in a way that's similar to the occupation. but they're also occupations that naturally attract the type. So these are very strongly predictive. I have a slide here that once again compares how these occupational scales, these occupations are generated, just highlighting the differences between the two. I want to make the point under the MBTI self-selection ratios. For instance, 2.5% of the general population in the U.S. is ENFJ, but 9.2% of career counselors are ENFJs. And so it produces a very high self-selection ratio, it's 3.69. Whenever you get a ratio like that that's over 1, it's saying that there's something about the occupation of career counseling that attracts ENFJ. And by golly, I teach the online Strong certification program, and the people who identify themselves clearly as career counselors, ENFJ, overwhelmingly more frequently than the other types. But at the same time, here's a type table for a sample of career counselors. We want to point out that every type is represented in the field. There are more ENFPs in this occupation than there are ENFJs, but there are more ENFPs in the population in general than there are ENFJs. So ENFJ has the stronger attraction of the occupation. ENFPs, they tend to default into this occupation. It's a little bit different. This, by the way, is from the MBTI type tables for occupations, indispensable resource for career counselors. It's published by CPP, and it should be dog-eared along with most of our other resources. I'm going to type together with the personal style scales for a minute, and then I'm going to pause again. Then we're going to show you a client where things don't seem to fit together. There's certainly some interesting career discussion around the Strong personal style scales and how they fit with the MBTI preference pairs. I love these on the Strong because if you don't get a theme on the Strong, if the basic interest scales aren't clear, if the occupations are all messed up, there's always some information in the personal style scales. We kind of joke in the Strong certification programs that a person can be gotless and bizless, and they might even be ossless, but no one is ever pizzless. There's always something on this page that we can discuss. I'm going to show you some correlations that come from the CPP data bank, and they tend to hold pretty firm over the last 2 revisions of the Strong. For instance, people with MBTI preferences for E or F tend to score to the right on work style. They want to work with people, and they want to be helpful to people. If both E and F are in their type code, they're likely to score farther to the right. They really want to work with people. They really want to help people. But what's interesting is that introverted SFJ and NFJ types, ISFJ, INFJ types, will often score to the right as well, even though they're introverted on the MBTI, because these 2 types extrovert the feeling part of their personality, which usually wants to help others. The key, though, is if you have an introvert on the MBTI who's scoring to the right on the personal style scales, they energize differently. And they're going to need to get their energy in order to extrovert, in order to work with people. Learning environment tends to line up with preferences for sensing or intuition, and you can probably estimate this. Students who prefer intuition usually also prefer traditional academic learning environments and score to the right on the learning environment scale. For those of you who are independent college counselors, this is really important when exploring potential campus cultures with high school students. Sensing students prefer to learn by demonstration and doing and short-term learning modules, very different from students who prefer intuition who are to the right. Leadership style tends to correlate with extroversion and intuition. Types that have either T or P in their codes, or even more so T and P in their codes, are more likely to be the risk takers. And extroversion is the only preference that correlates with team orientation. Anecdotally, I've also seen a lot more extroversion plus sensing scoring to the right on this scale than extroversion plus intuition. It's that ES that has the higher inclination towards team orientation. And we're going to look at the combined report, and then we're going to look at a case where things just don't seem to fit. But Karen, are there any more questions that have come in that might focus more specifically on the strong?
Yeah, we do have a couple here, and actually both of them are related to gender. So the first one is from Brandy. She's asking, can we get a strong that is not gender compared? I have had a client ask for this.
No, it's gender compared. The highest predictor of occupational choice is comparison with your own gender. And so the strong presents it both ways. It presents it in standard scores that compare you with both genders, and interpretive comments that compare you with gender specific. CPP is very research oriented, and this is based on research over decades and decades and decades. And every time a new revision of the strong comes out, those of us who are working on it just hope and pray that the genders will come closer together. And they do. They're creeping closer together. On the general occupational themes, they creep closer together about 1 point every 10 years. It's a slow process. There appears to be something different about men and women. Good question. I get it a lot too.
Okay, here's another from Andy. This one is, when looking at the strong score, please clarify which normative groups are used. You mentioned, in parentheses, a score might be considered high when compared to other women, even if it is low when compared to a male, end parentheses. Are other demographic groups considered? For example, an E may have a lower scaled score, but be higher on the hexagon based on demographic. Is gender the only factor?
Yeah, gender and population in general. CPP is using a normative population that is a snapshot of the working population in the United States at the time that it's normed. So demographics are considered very carefully when putting together the norm group, when putting together the national representative sample, the general representative sample. But the scores don't compare against those specific demographics. We encourage people who are working with specific groups to develop their own demographics, especially on learning environment, for instance. You're going to find in different campus environments that learning environment scale is a movable feast. You can develop literally your own norms for who's successful in what kinds of programs. Just to review it really quickly, the general occupational themes, the numbers compare you to men and women combined, the interpretive comments to just the gender. Same thing on the basic interest scales. The personal style scales, everything is compared to the combined group. Occupations, the numbers and the comments at the top of the page compare you with your own gender in the occupation.
Okay. We have another question asking, I think just in general for MBTI or the strong, are the results based on culture, it's asking? So basically if they were American born or just different cultures?
The forms that we've been talking about here are definitely based on a North American population. The MBTI has been I hate to use the word normed, but normative representative samples have been developed in countries throughout the world. And the MBTI has been translated into several languages as well. And there are probably some international distributors listening today because they participate in our webinars. And if you contact your international distributors, they will tell you what the distributions are. CPP also publishes, and I don't have the name of it on the tip of my tongue. Maybe Jack or Jim can check. CPP publishes a document that's the international distribution of types, so how type distributes out in many countries. I think there are 50 or 60 countries in that book, so you can see that. Now, in terms of the strong, which is very normative and normative with working samples, this is a critical question. The strong, as it is, it's works very well in the U.S., very well in Canada, very well in the U.K., in fact in Western Europe, very well in Australia, New Zealand. and we use it throughout China and Japan and Korea as well. But the more you get away from the industrial climate of North America, the less the occupational titles are valid. So we tend to focus more on the general occupational themes, the basic interests, and personal style in countries that are not Canada, U.S., U.K., Europe, etc., than we do focusing on occupations. Occupations are different in other countries. And a lot of people say, well, why haven't we collected these occupational samples for Germany, and why don't we have them for Japan? It costs hundreds and thousands of dollars to collect these occupational samples. And I'm sure that if an international distributor were interested in putting those samples together, CPP would want to talk to them. But so far it hasn't been done. We got one more, Karen, and then we better look at the quick overlapping here.
Yes. Let's see. Let me take this other question from Kimberly. Kimberly's asking, can you explain the difference between work style and team orientation?
Yeah, it actually shows up a little bit here on the slide. Work style is working with people, but it also has altruism built into it. There's something about the work style scale that has to do with helping others. Team orientation was a new scale with this revision, and I think it's going to be tweaked in the future. I mean, developing these scales is an ongoing process, but as it was developed, it seems to only overlap with extroversion and secondarily sensing. Team orientation is the desire to work with people. Yes, I mean, you can see that extroversion thing, but it's that collaboration thing. It's sharing credit for work that is done, sharing blame for what doesn't go right. It's that whole sharing with a team, with a group, when you're working on a project. And work style is, I want to work with people. So, for instance, you could get a low work style score and a high team orientation score that may be someone who wants to make individual contributions to a team, but they don't want to work with people so much. So combining those two scales, I think, is a really fun interpretive experience. And you add into that the MBTI EI preference, you've got so much to talk about just there. That's why we say that no one is ever PIS-less. There's always something to talk about on this page. I want to show the combined report, and it'll be brief, and then we'll look at a client that's a little bit more challenging. No discussion of these two instruments together would be complete without talking about the combined report a little bit. This report actually combines the responses from the Strong and the MBTI, and it can be purchased in two formats. And Jack and Jim can talk about this a little bit better at the end probably. But there's a bundle that you can purchase that's a little less expensive that includes a strong profile. Or you can purchase three things separately: the report by itself, the reports by themselves, and it's the Strong report, the MBTI report, and the combined report. So it's three different pieces, so either bundled or in pieces. Now, the report begins by combining the respondent's primary theme from the Strong with their type. So in this case, we're combining artistic plus ENFJ. And what's really interesting is that if the report, if this report is purchased separately outside of the bundle, you can interpret a Strong, interpret an MBTI, verify the type, verify the Strong code, the Strong theme, and then go into Skills 1, which is the scoring site, and actually adjust the general occupational theme and the type and produce a new combined report. And that can be very helpful, because in the type verification process or the Strong interpretation, someone could very easily verify a different type or theme. And the next thing the report does is suggest some general fields that bring the primary theme together with the type. It also provides ONET codes. Now, the combined report actually gives us an overlap between 122 Strong occupations and MBTI Career Report data that has 282 occupations. So it will come up with 10 occupations, just potential occupations to start with the typical work tasks. This is like a double hit. Then the report lists some additional occupations that are high on one of the profiles or the other. So these are not double hits. These are single hits that come from one of the assessments or the other. The one we've been looking at is pretty easy. That was ENFJ plus artistic social. Now let's look at one that isn't so easy. Walt is INFP plus artistic conventional. For those of you who are strong certified, when you see artistic conventional, I hope a flag goes up right away because you know it's going to be a challenge. The person we were just looking at is interested in human resources or doing promotion for a non-for-profit. This particular student, this particular person is an older adult client who's actually engaging in career transition. His name is Walt. Some of you may recognize what I'm going to say about Walt. We use him in some of our training programs. I've updated some information about him just because I've been in touch with his career counselor, so I kind of know what's going on about him. He's a really interesting case. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and maybe you can begin to hypothesize in your own minds as I give you his background. Walt is 38, and he works in the accounting office of a large university, and the word is out there's going to be a layoff. Notice his type here. We're looking at INFP. He verified INFP. He goes to the University Career Development Office for some job search assistance, and what he was expecting to do is to make a move to another accounting job, possibly in business or industry where he could make more money. He's married, he has a 6-year-old daughter, his wife is a nurse, and a higher income would be helpful. He's an alumnus of this university. He majored in business with an accounting focus, and he minored in creative writing. And I'm hoping that I'm hearing little explosions. Aha, artistic, conventional, accounting, creative writing. Then he served in the Air Force for 8 years after college graduation. He was editor of the Daily International Internet Bulletin in the Air Force, and he supervised a small staff. Now, he stopped in the university placement office right out of the Air Force. He saw the job listing in the accounting office and was offered the job the same day. So no exploration or anything, just right to the job. Some interesting things about his parents, and sometimes information about parents unlocks a lot. He refers to his parents as workaholics. He says that his dad is an attorney and travels all the time. Mom teaches English at a small college. She loves her work. His father never talks about his at all. Walt likes some of his work, but has never given liking work much thought. This is what he says exactly. Work is work. I can't earn a living doing what I like most, which is writing, so this is just a job. Mom loves her work, but she can afford to. Dad brings in the big bucks. When you hear something like that, you're getting messages. You're getting career messages that are pervasive. Now, what I wanted you to notice was that Walt's dual majors are on opposite sides of the hexagon. You can almost feel the internal tension between his possible passion and his shoulds, between who he was meant to be, INFP, and what he has become. And this will probably show up on the strong as well. And it does. The two top general occupational themes are on opposite sides of the hexagon, and when they are, they often will cancel out high scores. Now, for those, I'm very sorry that earlier there was a slide where this piece was missing. These are the standard scores over here that compare responses to men and women. These are the comments that compare his responses just to his gender, to men. These are his basic interest scales, and I want you to notice a couple of things. Do you see that the themes are mixed? We've got 5 high basic interest scales and 5 different themes. This is what happens when the general occupational themes are opposite. And can you see where the high basic interest scales come from? His majors, his work, his military experience, his employment on a university campus, everything that he's previously been exposed to. There isn't very much INFP here except maybe the passion for writing. That's what the strong does. It picks up on what you become. The artistic theme is showing up pretty often in the occupational scales as well. Here's what all of the artistic scales look like on his strong. I drew a blue line down underneath 40 because anything on that blue line or to the right is considered similar to the occupation. Now the discussion with him was really important. He acknowledged that ISTJ was his should type. He verified INFP, but it was a painful discussion. It took 2 sessions. He assumed that since his education was in accounting, he should just continue in this direction. And on one level, he knew that INFP was his true type. And if he was going to follow his natural type, now was the time to make a career change. But Walt is not a risk taker. Look at that risk-taking score. If he were a young college student without a work history, or if he were not reluctant to let go of his training and experience, a career counselor might be able to guide him in the exploration of the artistic career fields and occupations indicated by his reports. He might even go happily ever after into the sunset writing poetry. But Walt is 38. He has a family to support. He's still hanging on to his military and accounting knowledge and experience, so we're not going to go there. Some of you may be using this booklet, this approach already. His career counselor was using the career exploration booklet that I wrote for CPP with her guidance classes, and she modified it a little bit to use with Walt. This is a more open-ended interpretation system. It's a little more N than S, a little more counseling-oriented than primarily just reporting the data. The process has respondents use the results from the 2 assessments to answer 4 questions. The 4 questions we've already talked about. Who am I? Why do I want to work? What specifically do I want to do? And where in terms of work environment do I want to do it? And this is specifically, especially effective when there isn't a clear relationship between type and the strong. And I'll show you how Walt answered the questions and where he got the answers from. This is the Who Am I? INFP. These are INFP descriptors that he identified with. He pulled out of the INFP descriptions the words and phrases that he connected with. They come from Introduction to Type, just the basic Introduction to Type booklet. Look at this. These are the strong theme descriptors that he identified with. Artistic, conventional, artistic again, conventional again, personal style scales. So we've got 2 different sets of descriptions, one from the MBTI and one from the strong. There's some overlap, certainly around artistic and INFP, not with the conventional. Now the next piece I think is really important for all of us. The answer to the why do I want to work question is deeply rooted in our needs and our value systems. It's intertwined with the basic issues of life. Why is my life important? What role does work have to play in my overall life plan? What motivates me to do my best? What is my mission in life? What does God have in mind for me? Walt wrestled with this as he was verifying his INFP type. This is what he stated. From NF, from INFP, ITT stands for Introduction to Type, so he pulled this right out of the booklet as well. Creativity, individuality, that's the artistic. He wants to use skills that he already has. That's the conventional. To provide security for his family. This is his career mission statement where he pulled all of this together, the central core of what career counseling is. He said, I want my work to have a purpose beyond a paycheck. I want to use my creativity to make the world a better place and to provide for my family. Now, he didn't make these statements up. They came right out of the publications. Then what we did to answer the what exactly do I want to do, we looked at the occupational scale descriptions on the Strong Interpretive Report. And he pulled out some task statements that he really connected with. And I've put in parentheses the occupational title that the task statements actually came from. So you can see we're not really using the job title here, job titles here. We're using tasks. Now, in addition, we had an INFP career report which talks about work tasks this way, personally meaningful, express creativity, focusing on future possibilities. You see INFP there? Now the last question is where, in terms of work environment, do I want to work? From his strong, artistic, and social, he pulled out these descriptors: a work environment that's creative, imaginative, organized, efficient, where I can be responsible for my own work and feel secure in my job. Now, we looked up the basic interest scales in Where Do I Go Next, and there were 5 possible specific kinds of work environments, kinds of employers that he pulled out that might be possibilities. Now, these employer types don't appear on the Strong. This comes from the Where Do I Go Next booklet. Now, also in terms of the where question, some work environment descriptors. He wants an environment where he can be autonomous, where people aren't closely supervised, where there's quiet, but where they appreciate new ways of doing things, and maybe providing quiet for concentration, but he really enjoyed collegial relationships. And this is right out of the report. I think you can see that there's some tension here with Walt between his natural INFP type and what he has spent his life preparing to do, which is much more conventional than it is INFP. And he's still certainly a work in process, a work in progress. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what he's doing now, but I want his mission statement up here so you can kind of digest it. He's come to realize that life tends to forever be a work in progress for INFPs. His business training taught him how to set a goal, go for it, get it, and maximize it. That's the other side of his type working for him. What he learned from this experience in career coaching and career counseling is that personal goals for INFPs change and grow forever. But more than anything, they have to be true to themselves. And what he did through this process was discover what that truth was, who he really was. He really wanted to write, but he also had a family to support. What he started doing after this was applying his discipline to writing. And now he writes every day and has done it faithfully for 2 years. But to do that, he had to find a non-conventional job that would not drain his creativity, so that he had creativity left over for his writing. And he applied for a position in the public relations office of the university, and he got it. The university really wanted to keep him. He had a good work history, military background, well-educated. The PR office was happy to have him. He started writing news releases for the university and discovered another interest as well. This is INFP, interest developing, unfolding, and that was in grant writing. The School of Business, a couple of years ago, applied for a very large grant to recruit minority students out of high school. Walt is African American, and asked him to work on the grant. He did. They got the grant, and other departments began approaching him as well. He's recently completed a professional certificate in technical writing. That was one of the job titles that showed up on his Strong. And he took the certificate at the university, and he's now taking courses in grant writing. You know, his counselor gives me regular updates because Walt's one of my favorite case studies, and she says that he's a different person. He enjoys his work. He's doing some creative writing. He's exploring other areas for his writing, and he and his wife are expanding their family. Now, on paper, Walt doesn't come together perfectly. See, the perfect client will have a clear type and a differentiated Strong. They'll be in this green area. That's what we hope for. It's what we learn about when we take classes and how to do career counseling. Unfortunately, it's not usually the case, especially with college students who are still figuring out who they are. And when the Strong is differentiated and the MBTI is unclear, very often some counseling support is needed while personality is being developed. Their interests may very well have been formed by external sources, and they may not have discovered who they actually are. Now, when the MBTI is clear up here, but the Strong is undifferentiated, we can suggest career fields that they would like if they knew about them. It's a career exploration process. Now, if both the MBTI and the Strong are unclear, undifferentiated, it may very well be beyond the scope of career counseling. And we have to know, as career counselors, as coaches, as advisors, when referral is called for. I've used a lot of references throughout this. You've heard me mention these. These are all available from CPP. And what I'm going to do is put up the slide on certification, and then Karen will have about 10 minutes for questions. And if you're interested in becoming certified to use the Strong and the MBTI, you can be certified to use the MBTI through CPP. They're doing programs all over the country now. The American Management Association, Center for Applications of Psychological Type, and GS, which is my company, does an online program specifically for educators and career practitioners. GS also offers Strong certification online, and we do a live Strong certification program in Lake Tahoe in June. This year it's June 11th through the 14th. It's already filling. We're about half full. So if you're thinking about coming to Lake Tahoe this summer, combine a little vacation with a little bit of hard work, learn statistics out on the lake. Not a bad thing to do. I always want to introduce Jack and Jim. Jack and Jim are the education account representatives, and I think they're on the line, so any questions that come in about products, I'm going to turn over to them. This is their contact information. And just a reminder that international customers are encouraged to go to cpp.com/global sales for information on products. If you'd like to try out the MBTI and Strong assessments or sample one of the reports, here's a link to the evaluations website. And you'll be asked to complete a short evaluation first and then directed to the testing site. Make sure and do that before February 24th. It's only going to be active for a couple of weeks. I manage a discussion group for Strong practitioners at linkedin.com. And that's become a very active group, and it's fun for me to see how those of you who are using the Strong are using it and what you're doing with it. And it's not all about me giving expert opinions. The only time I jump in is when there's some information that is really going to add to the discussion that's already going on. There's also a link for you to complete a form for continuing education and MBTI Master Practitioner credit if you're NBCC or Master Practitioners. In order to get the certificate for the webinars, you do need to be in attendance throughout and go to this website. And as usual, CPP is giving us a discount. There's a 10% off discount on purchases between now and February 24th. This does not apply to international orders or to Skills 1, but it does apply to everything else. Karen, you probably got a whole bunch of questions, and we've got a little bit of time. And while they're coming in, I'll leave this up for a minute, and then I'm going to go back also to the slide that has the links, the previous slide.
Yeah,
do you want to feed me some questions?
Here. Okay, let's see here. So we have one from Kimberly. Kimberly is asking, what is the best way to explain to a college student if one of their general occupation themes is very low, but on the bar chart is higher than a theme that is low?
Actually, I wish I had a picture of this to throw up there. The bars are listed. They're visually listed in the order of their comparison to their gender. So, for instance, a young woman may score 52 on realistic and 58 on social. And her realistic score will be considered high and will appear first. The bar will be shorter, and then social will appear second, and that might be not high compared to women, but moderate. So it's listed. Those bars are listed according to the comparison with the gender, and that happens a lot. It happens with non-traditional gender interests: women who are interested in realistic stuff, and men who are interested in artistic stuff.
Okay. Another question is from Beth. How are the specific occupations used for comparison determined? On the college version, for example, I question why production worker is used. It also seems heavy on teaching.
The occupations don't change from profile to profile on the strong. If production worker shows up, there's a reason for it. Again, it's not the job title that we're focusing on. There's something about the student that answered the strong the same way that production workers answer the strong. This comes up. This happens to be a job title that comes up very frequently for people whose strong themes are not developed yet.
Okay, we have another, let's see, from John. Some occupational codes are not congruent. For example, artistic and conventional. Are you saying an A can find satisfaction in a C career if the environment supports their creativity? Or does it dictate an A would not be satisfied in a C field?
It doesn't dictate it. The example I love to use is my accountant in Southern California who's an ENFP artistic, and he's a CPA. The name of his company is Growth Encouragement International. And what he's all about are creative ways of presenting accounting to his clients. And he considers accounting a creative learning experience. He had to make that environment. He's certified at all levels of accounting, at the highest level. But when he was working in corporate America as a corporate accountant, he was miserable. He hated it. And sure enough, ended up my career counseling client and then ended up my accountant. So you have to find, if you're an artistic person and you have conventional interests, and he was really interested in accounting, you have to find the environment that will honor your artistic personality. And in the case of my accountant, it was the ENFP personality.
Here's one from Barbara. So Barbara says, I combine the MBTI and Strong a little differently. I take the heart of the personality type, create a chart listing the functions sequentially, meaning dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior functions. Then I take the dominant and auxiliary functions and create an action statement for each type.
Love it.
I use this as a gatekeeper and then run the results then run the results interest through this gate. The interests that match the client, dominant and auxiliary functions, we use as a starting point to explore further career and educational options. What do you think?
I love it. I love it. And if you're using that as the gateway, then everything on the strong can be processed through that. Oh, I love it.
Great. Let's see, here's another.
Watch out. We're going to ask her to do a webinar, right?
Yeah, there we go. Next one. Let's see, another one is, and I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Mika, sorry. Her is personal style skills. I recently had a client right down the middle on each style. What do you take from that?
I want to see the rest of the profile. If they're right down the middle on the personal style scales, they probably had a lot of indifferent responses on the strong. On the strong, you can respond from strongly like, indifferent, dislike, strongly dislike, and when PISs are down the middle, it's almost always a high preponderance of indifferent responses, even to the point of the profile not being valid. But I want to see what her theme, I suspect the themes didn't differentiate either. Usually when something like that happens, I'll go back to type. I think I began this with a slide that said that type is the fallback. When the strong is flat, we have to work on verifying type.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another question from Demona. Let's see here. So asking about the strong revision. What is going to be new in the upcoming strong revision?
Oh, I was supposed to push the strong revision. Okay. There's a revision of the strong coming out in April with revised occupational scales. Cosmetically, it will look the same, so it's not a question of retraining. It's just new occupations. There are going to be 130 occupations. I think the most exciting thing is that on the reports, they'll be hyperlinked directly to ONET. So you'll be able to students will be able to get that information really easily. One of the strengths of the strong, what's kept it around for so long and why it works so well, is that it's constantly renormed, and this was the year to renorm occupations. The general sample is next, and I don't know exactly what the launch date is, but I've been told mid-April.
Yeah,
just in time for the certification program in Lake Tahoe in June.
Let's see, another one, let's see, from Tamara. Is there a way to integrate MBTI Step 2 with the Strong?
There isn't a system. There isn't a system that has been written down that we process through with publications and things. But the Step 2 program that we do, that GS does, focuses on applications in career counseling, and we bring them together in some logical steps. But what's really interesting is that Step 2 is the behavioral interpretation of type, and all those behaviors translate into the work functions from the occupations on the Strong. So you can make connections. I just haven't written it out step by step yet. I'm sure that if you're using them together, you're figuring it out. And I'd love a discussion on that somewhere sometime, Karen.
Yeah, sounds good.
Do we have time for one more, and then we better...
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. One more. So this last one is from Michelle. How would you define the difference between career counseling and career coaching, especially relating to the use of these instruments?
Oh, there's another webinar topic. There seem to be two branches in the field of career development right now that have been labeled. Career counselors come into the field from a background in counseling. It's usually a master's degree in counseling. They're very often national certified counselors or licensed professional counselors. Career coaches tend to come into the field more from a business orientation, very often from HR or training and development. And their background, it tends to be in business. Now, by definition, career counselors will very often probe a little bit more into the why behind the behaviors. So what went on, for instance, with Walt, I discussed his parents, because his parents defined his messages. And if something had come up that required counseling support, my licensing would have allowed me to provide it, or I would have made a referral. In coaching, you're dealing much more with actual behaviors and how to change them, or how to improve on them, or capitalize on them, or recognize gifts and pitfalls, etc. And I think that the MBTI type dynamics is very useful there, and can be coached in the moment of the session. But you're not going behind the scenes, so to speak, to look at underlying motivators and things quite so much. That's my take on it. There's a mission statement on the American Counseling Association and the National Career Development Association websites about counseling, and there's a mission statement on one of the coaching certification websites that defines coaching. But the coaching profession is so new that standards haven't even been developed yet, so it's kind of hard to be more specific than that.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, and I actually just want to mention that Roberta is thanking you. She says that the story of Walt was incredibly compelling, moving, and illustrative. So just a thank you from her.
Walt's happy.
So I'm sorry to say we've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to attend and for asking so many excellent questions. If your question was not answered during the webinar, please feel free to email Jack or Jim. I'd also like to thank Judy for sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. So thank you very much, Judy.
Thanks, Karen.
And just a reminder that while the PowerPoint slides are not available, the recording will be on our website in approximately a week. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing series featuring Judy as our expert. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 5th and will cover the topic Building Communication Skills Using MBTI Type Strategies. So to register, you can visit our website at cpp.com/askanexpert. So we hope you'll be able to join us in March, and thank you all for attending today, and have a wonderful day.